Wondering if your accountant is charging too much or on the lookout for a new one and wondering how much you should expect to pay? Well, this video is for you. On Facebook and social media, I see all the time the question being asked, what should I be paying for an accountant? And a lot of comparison takes place, and quite often you see someone will quote, I'm paying £100, I'm paying £600, and that's it. No more commentary, nothing. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of added commentary. And the problem with it is it's very, very difficult to compare one accountant against another just based on the amount of money you're paying. So I thought it'd be a really good video just to touch on this point and give you some points of things you should look for when you're looking to talk to an accountant, and whether if you're looking at your current accountant and thinking, am I being charged too much because my mates around the corner seem to be paying less, or you're out there for a new one, you just don't know what it's going to cost. I think there's going to be some interesting points in this video for you. So we're going to cover them and dig into some detail so you can get a bit of a feel for the kind of things you should be keeping an eye on. Because a lot of accountancies price different. Some very old school will do by time, so they'll start a stopwatch every time you phone them or when they start your affairs. I think that's a very outdated model these days. Most will do a fixed price for you, but that fixed price can be based on multiple factors. Like whenever we quote here, we'll ask you and want to know about your business, your aims, what sort of relationship you want with us, and multiple other factors that come to that price. So it very much is a case of just chatting to multiple different accountants if you're looking at price and getting a feel for the type of services they offer, bearing in mind the points I'm about to cover. So I think the main point to understand to begin with is the fact that limited companies are more expensive. So if you're thinking of starting out with a limited company, I always ask the same question, which is why? And there are multiple reasons why you might want to do this, but quite often people have just said, well, my friends have got them, or I've heard that it saves tax, and it 100% will save tax in the right circumstance. But early on, if you're just treading water, it can be an expensive thing to have. We actually recorded another video on should I be a limited company, which hopefully is going to appear about here shortly. And you can go and watch that one to see all the different reasons why you may or may not want to be. But if you've decided for whatever reason you're going to be limited, then yes, it is going to cost you more. And the reason that is if you're a sole trader, so you're an individual, you have to fill out one tax return a year. It's possible, because there are free HMRC software, to do this yourself online. I've never recommended anyone to do it because there's 22,000 pages of tax law there that you need to know to get the right result, or the best result. But in actual fact, you can do it yourself. The problem with limited companies is there's vastly more work to do, in that you have to submit a set of accounts to the taxman, and they have to be done in a very specific accounting format, compliant with the law. They then have to be tagged electronically, which is a commercial bit of software that attaches them to an electronic tax return, which is also tagged, and that information gets transmitted to Revenue and Customs. There's no free software for this. You have to use commercial software. So as a result, even I've got accounting clients who don't want to pay the software. They do the accounts, they know the accounting standards, but they might not be great on tax, or they just don't have the subscription and they pay us to do it. So it's very normal. Nearly every limited company, in fact, every limited company I've ever come across who is in the small business world has an accountant for at least this reason as a minimum reason. And that's generally why you'd seek out an accountant, to make sure that you can get the end of the year stuff done. And along with that end of year accounts, there's also a cut down version, often referred to as abbreviated or filleted, and it's just a set of accounts that they chop a lot of the detail out of, because it goes on the public record at Companies House. So you don't want disgruntled exes, competitors, nosy family members, for example, all looking at how much money you actually earned. All it does is it gives a snapshot in what they call like the balance sheet, shows sort of how healthy your company is. So if you're going for bank lending or your credit report, and all these things can have some data to work with, but it doesn't show them like how much money you turned over or how much actual profit you made. So normally you'd have that done. You can submit full ones. I've never seen anyone do it, but it is possible. But you need that done as a minimum. And on top of this, you have some Companies House returns. So you've got a confirmation statement and a persons of significant control register. It's quite a mouthful. That gets wrapped up in one return that needs to be done each year with Companies House. There's a fee for that, and that all gets done through an online portal with Revenue and Customs and goes onto the public record. So that's all the basics of the actual what you need for an accountant to do, just the absolute minimum. But in order to do that, different accountants will work with different types of records. Some will be happy with a carrier bag full of stuff, some will want you in the cloud, some will want you a minimum on spreadsheets, and anywhere in between. And quite often there's a charge there that will help you get there in terms of bookkeeping, and we're going to discover that in more detail in a moment. If you're enjoying this video and you'd like to hear more like it, make sure to click the subscribe button below to be notified whenever we release another one. So let's scoot back to sole traders for a moment and this single tax return. So I did see recently actually on an online forum somebody moaning about the fact that the tax return takes just 20 minutes minutes, and accountants were charging upwards of 350 quid to do it. And the answer is, if you had the simplest of tax returns, you knew exactly what boxes to do, you did it regularly, you had it all set up, you could potentially get the boxes in the return in 20 minutes. But you're never really going to be able to do that achievably. So unfortunately, no, us accountants don't earn £360 an hour plus doing this type of work. It does actually take a significant amount of time to do and to do properly. But of course, what you have quite often with accountants is you've got a couple of things going on. Now, you need that return done, and the basics of what you're paying for is the return. Now, what else happens alongside that is the bit that's open for discussion. So you can pay tax returns anywhere, you see it quite often, 350 quid to say 600 quid, somewhere in that region. You might see it seems the same thing. You'll go to one accountant and say, how much for my tax return? And they'll give you that figure. And then you'll go to another one and they'll give you that figure. I've seen them as low as 120 quid. I've seen them as high as £1,200 plus VAT. So it very much depends on your affairs, but it's also depending on what they're doing. So if they're just taking your records and sticking them on the form and submitting them, there is a benefit to that because it's saving you time, and it's also saving you potential penalties because you would presume that it's done correctly and it's all on time and all that sorted. So there is a service to that. But personally, I think the better option is to make sure that someone's looking at your affairs from a tax point of view, and especially if you're in business, making sure that you've got all the expenditure you should have, being able to compare different methods of types of expenditure. So for example, with your car for business and your van for business, any motor really, or any vehicle for business, there are several ways of calculating how you can deduct that against your tax. The same with working at home, and it's having someone look at that in any depth. And also look around your other situation. Have you used different allowances? Have you made use of potentially a spouse's allowance, and all these kind of wider tax saving things. So, and that's normally where you'll see the difference in standard. And us accountants generally, I think, are quite bad at explaining to you actually the detail that goes on behind the scenes. So when you do see a really, really cheap one, if you are paying say 120 quid, you've really got to ask, what am I getting for that money? And is it an investment? Because from my point of view, anything I'll spend in business, I want it to return some money. And I know us as accountants, if you're making a reasonable profit, we will be free. We will be able to make sure that we save our money back in tax savings and missed opportunities that you wouldn't have spotted. So it's always worth taking the time to hunt around and make sure that you're happy and confident that the person working on your affairs has the ability to do that. And I think that's the key thing. So the items I would look for when comparing prices for a sole trader is things like, do they do a set of accounts that go with it? Now, if you're an ambitious business owner, you'll want to know where you're spending all your money and everything. And these are great for historic purposes. Sometimes you'll want them during a lending scenario, and also just for you, so you can see where you can improve in your business. Certain types of accountants with value-added services will be able to look at those as well and tell you even more insights into those numbers. So there's all these things that go around them. So do they do that? Do you, if you had a HMRC tax investigation, is those fees to defend you included? And I use the word defend, but actually a lot of the time you've done nothing wrong. In fact, in the last couple of years for us, nobody's paid any tax back to the tax man, but there's been people who've just been, they popped up on the computer system and had an investigation. But there's a lot of back and forth that goes on between us and the revenue for our clients to do that, to which there would normally be a fee unless it's included, or unless they sell, and this is the thing to ask your accountant, do they sell a cover that covers that? A lot of accountants do. If you wanted a mortgage reference or a rent reference, is that included? What sort of advice do you get round all year? Every time you phone up, is it an extra fee? Or can you phone up and ask, can I deduct this? I'm thinking of buying a new van, what's the best thing to do? How does that work? Is cloud software included? And what other support are you getting through the year and information? Do they do newsletters? Do they do seminars? Is there any other support? So for example, with us, we have a business coach who gives a session to all our clients for free every month to help them along with their business. You know, there's all these added value adds that can happen for an accountant, and sometimes there isn't any, but then you might pay less. So it's definitely worth having a look around and seeing what's on offer and really getting the most out of your accountant. So they're the type of things to consider with the sole trader. And what I'd say is a lot of those things are still relevant for the limiteds. So moving on to the limiteds, the biggest thing you have to look at here is all the breakdown of the services, because there's a lot more tax law going on, and that's why it's so complex. You know, you've got company law, plus you've got the company tax law and personal tax law and employee tax law, like all these different areas, potentially VAT thrown in there as well. And as a result, there's a lot going on. So that's why the fees are higher. But, and as we've said, there's a lot more work generally at the year end. But on top of that, you've also got there's a more stringent bookkeeping requirement really. So you've got bookkeeping, and that's the bit I was telling you about before of if you've got a carrier bag, how does that get into a set of accounts? Most accountants would want you to do bookkeeping, or they would provide that. Some accountants do this thing where they only do accounts, so then they've got another bookkeeper they know that they would point you in. Some have got them in-house like we have. It just depends on how it works. So when you're comparing prices with your mates or with other accountants, does it include bookkeeping? Does it include VAT returns if you need those? Does it include, again, the software, the HMRC inquiry insurance? How often will they speak to you? So for me, with a limited company, you want to be speaking to your accountant, or at least having some form of communication or system with them at least once a quarter, to make sure that your director's loan account and the money that you're drawing is really, really efficient, and we're not getting ourselves in any technical problems with that, and that we're spotting opportunities to save tax. Now, that is not a massively common arrangement. You'll find that a lot of accountants just see you annually, and I think that's a missed mistake. So you need to ask, how often can I see you? How does that work? Is there a service that's done for that? How often can I call you? The same as a sole trader. How much advice can I have? Can I call you whenever? Is it a stopwatch deal? If I'm in the construction industry, will you carry out that? Will you issue the certificates of deduction to my subcontractors directly? Do I have to do that? Do I have to do the company's house return? Do I have to do my own personal tax return? Is that an additional charge? And also, who is doing my work in terms of what qualifications have they got? So as you'd imagine, sometimes you have one single accountant, and we hear this a lot when people come to speak to us. They've been dealing with an accountant, there's one accountant, and then there's just several sort of lower level staff doing the majority of their work, and they can't necessarily speak to the person that actually does the end work, and all these kind of things. So you've got to get a feel for the setup, I think, as well, and have confidence in the people that are going to be doing the work, and to make sure, of course, that you're supported throughout the year when you need it. And as we mentioned with the sole trader, what else, as a client, do I benefit with working with these guys? And in terms of actual prices, I mentioned with sole trade that, it was quite often you'd see £350 to £600 easy in that bracket. I mean, you see them going, again, that they could have bookkeeping and things on top of it, but just for the tax return preparation, those kind of prices are quite normal in the accountancy world. And with limiteds, if you're getting anything for less than about £1,000 for just the year-end stuff alone, forgetting about VAT, bookkeeping, payroll, all these other things you might need, and it sounds weird for payroll, but if you're just starting out, you'll start to understand that the director's payroll can save you a significant amount of money. So about £1,600 of corporation tax is a worthwhile investment, helps you get your state pension year, all these other things. You're doing very well. If you're getting that for under 1,000 just for the year end, I think that is going well. And again, they vary massively. I've seen those at 1,000. I've seen them at 8,000. It just depends on the level of turnover quite often and complexity within those accounts. And again, you can have an accountant who will be doing it for a very low value for what you would deem, if you just looked at it at the surface, is the same thing. So ask some of these questions and hopefully you'll get a feel. But I think the summary of this for me, and I always say the same thing to people when I'm talking to them, is price aside, who do you have more confidence knows their stuff? Who out of the ones you're comparing do you feel is going to look after you, you're going to have the relationship, you trust, you like, all those kind of things, and steer towards them? Because at the end of the day, the accountant's going to be dealing with some stuff that's very close to you, i.e. the money that's in your pocket, and you want to maximise that and make sure that you're doing everything legally and above board, so there's no skeletons in that closet and everything else. So compare all of the services on offer and the value they bring, and then make a decision. Please do not compare pound for pound, because you'll have a very difficult time. I'd never envy anybody looking for accountants. I know when I first went self-employed and was looking at various different options, it was difficult back then, even more so now because of the world of technology we live in. But definitely compare it all. And to help you with that, I've also done a separate video of 10 traits to look for when you're trying to hire an accountant for small business. So definitely check that out, and that'll give you some pointers of other stuff aside from price that you could look for. Hopefully that's been some help to you. And obviously, if you do need a quote from another accountant, you know where we are. See you on the next one.